us internationally. Thank you for your patience for the last few moments. We just had a few issues getting me online, so thank you very much for waiting. Let's get straight into it. Right, we're talking about the bowel nosodes today, and this will follow on from the 4-part webinar we had with Ellen over the last 6 to 8 weeks, where we stood from mouth to anus and all the illnesses that came up, the remedies that were appropriate, digestive and nutrition support. This helps to round off or put an end to that series, pardon the pun. But again, those of you who know me know that I'm going to take a very practical approach to this, and we're going to put some personalities to the bowel nosodes so we get to understand them. There are only a few of them. A lot of people get worried about the bowel nosodes. They think it's a bit of a minefield. So hopefully this walkthrough will clarify that a lot. Right, and those of you who are current students at the CPH know that we cover the whole array of things. When you enroll here at the homeopathy course, we cover, as you can see in front of you, everything from nutrition, herbs, supplements, right the way up to homeopathy, flower essences, and meditative poisons as part of the course. And as we just said today, we're focusing on the bowel nosodes. Nosodes, as many of us know, bearing in mind we do have people that are currently not students either. So nosodes are remedies that are derived from either products of disease or disease tissue itself, or even pathogenic organism, which the bacteria of the gut are. And these nosodes are derived from a culture. We'll go into a little bit of history, but not too much, because we don't want to make us bacteriologists, but we were practicing homeopaths, so we say, how can we apply this information that we know? And often nosodes are used to overcome an obstacle to cure. And the homeopaths amongst you will have your own systems of dealing with patients, finding your rubrics, repertoizing, and coming up with a remedy or a combination of remedies that in theory should cure the patient and restore them to health. However, sometimes we reach a block, and blocks could be toxic. They may have an allopathic drug layer, they may have social drugs, they have other environmental effects affecting them that are enabling them to heal, or there might just be something in the tissue itself which is not allowing it to heal properly. So when we get a diseased tissue, that will affect the whole body system and have a cascade of events. And one of the key obstacles to cure from where we're concerned today is something called intestinal dysbiosis. In simple terms, that's an upset of the bioflora inside our gut. And our gut doesn't just mean our stomach or small intestine, right from our mouth to our anus. And many of these bacteria are found in the colon and rectum, more so than the actual stomach and duodenum itself. And the dysbiosis affects our ability to respond to homeopathic treatment, to even nutrition. And if those of you listened into Ellen's webinars for the last few months, it also affects our ability to absorb the nutrition from the foodstuffs we eat, leading to inflammation, etc., etc. So even though we think we are eating the right nutrition, we're taking the right remedies, for some reason, they just don't seem to be working. And sometimes the nosodes can provide that missing link and remove that obstacle to cure to allow the remedies to work. As we said, there's a complex illnesses that can be associated with the bowel nosodes. And this is just a quick slide to show us that there's a myriad of symptoms that we can look at. And some people have actually created materia medica of bowel nosodes to treat them like remedies, which indeed they are. So you can go down the materia medica route and find individual things. What we're going to work on today and focus on today is their actual personalities. Now, just to bring us back to how these arrived, at the turn of the century, people found out and discovered pathogens, bugs, and bacteria. And that was probably due to the advent and invention of microscopes, being able to see smaller and smaller organisms, which allowed the study. So Edward Bach, who was the first bacteriologist as far as we're concerned, he joined the hospital in London and began to investigate the various vaccines and how they affect pathogens. Around about the same time, Alexander Fleming, he discovered penicillin and found that it actually lysed and broke up Staphylococcus bacteria, and therefore we had the first antibiotic. And when around the same period of time, John Patterson was working independently, not from London, but all the way up north in Glasgow, and he began to investigate bacteria as well, and how they affected homeopathic treatment, and indeed how homeopathic treatment affected the bacteria themselves. As we know, everything in the body is related, so one is not in isolation from the other. His wife, Liz Patterson, she continued his research after his death, put together and collaborated many things along with her own findings, and then she published her findings in the British Homeopathic Journal. back in 1960. So in terms of advent of bowel nosodes, in medical history timeline, they're relatively new, only 40, 50, 60 years old. And in practice, not many people have been using them that well or that effectively, so they're quite new. People are still learning. And we must also bear in mind that in the 60s and 70s and 80s, many people were classical homeopaths. So they were trained with a different view of potencies, remedies, and how to approach these nosodes. Hopefully we will cover that, dispel a few myths, and then talk about how we're going to use that in the Q&A section later. The intestinal flora ourselves is very interesting for us to understand as humans how it's developed in us. The fetus, when it's in the womb, has no bacteria whatsoever. Everything is transferred through the placenta, amniotic fluid, umbilical cord, etc. So that's fine. But after birth, there's rapid colonization. And as many of us know already, having a natural birth through the birth canal starts that process in the baby. By the time they get to 2 years of age, their flora inside them, their intestinal flora, which is all the gut microbes, are very similar to adults. And as their immune system strengthens, they develop other things along the way to strengthen their gut flora and their immune system. Many intestinal bacteria, especially our gut bacteria in our stomach, actually help to produce our antibodies and our neurotransmitters. So a lot of people times we talk about the gut-brain reaction. This is why, because when our gut bacteria produce our neurotransmitters, such as serotonin, dopamine, etc., they help us feel better. When we don't feel right, we feel it in our gut. It affects the acidity of our stomach. It affects the flow and the peristaltic movements of our actual intestines themselves. That can slow us down. That can make us feel sluggish, congested, constipated. Alternatively, if it's hyperexcitement, that can lead to nervousness and diarrhea. All of these things which you're familiar with. Other things that can affect it, obviously we just covered it: stress, diet, lifestyle, and drugs, and indeed surgery. People have appendectomies, splenectomies, they have colonectomies, etc. And these things will affect the flora and fauna and affect it repopulating as it needs to be. Diseases can also affect us, and half the time we deal with patients that come to us with irritable bowel, ulcerative colitis, cancer, autoimmune diseases such as lupus, etc., where the body's attacking itself, so the body becomes inflamed on the inside. This was covered already, like I said, in Ellen's part 3 and 4 of her webinars, so you may want to refer back to that and how we can manage that. When do we use the bowel nosodes? Now, we get asked this a lot, and sometimes there's confusion, so let's clarify that and open up our options for that. Oftentimes, when there's a group of remedies, we have 3 or 4 similar remedies, but no clear picture of any one particular one, for those of us that like to go the one single remedy route. Then we can have a nosode to clear up and clarify the symptom picture that we can repertoire upon. Because again, when there's disharmony in the gut flora, that will affect the symptoms the patient presents. Pretty much like when we have an allopathic drug, sometimes we have to be clear that the symptoms that the patient presents with, are they related to the drug they're taking, the side effects, or are they actually symptoms of the disease manifestation of that patient? They can also be given when the indicated remedy fails. So it's not when the remedy fails. The remedy is right, but it doesn't seem to be working, and that goes back to us saying that it's an obstacle to cure. That the remedy's right, your repertoire is right, you've got the symptom picture right, but somehow it just doesn't seem to work. Then we can use them very effectively there. In fact, I tend to use most there. The other thing we talk about is they can be used to open up the bowels as a route of elimination. We know there are four only routes of elimination. Respiration. We know when we breathe out, we can sometimes, if people drink, they get a blood breathalyzer test, you can smell alcohol on their breath. Perspiration. If you have a dinner high in garlic or something, you can smell it on your skin. Urination, peeing, defecation, pooing. These are our 4 main routes. And oftentimes, we take a case, we ask about the bowels, we ask about perspiration, respiration, etc. But if they're constipated for a few days, we already know that that's a blockage, it's an obstacle to cure. Sometimes they come as the main incidence that of their key presenting complaint, that they're constipated. And sometimes the bowel nosode may be all you need just to open them up, quite simply. Nothing more technical. So having said that, let's focus on the personalities of 6 or 7 of the key bowel nosodes, so we get a picture of what they look like. And then when we see that patient in front of us, we can say, right, now I know what I'm dealing with. Now we'll start off with fecalis. And every one of these remedies, like I said, we must remember they are bacteria that have been cultured from patients exhibiting these symptoms to see what symptoms each bacterial culture presents with. So the fecalis patient is inflexible, fixed mindset. And like that gentleman there, no way. I'm not going to move, they're rigid. So when we think of the body, anything that's rigid and fixed in the body will tend to lead us to think of fecalis if we're considering a bowel nosode. And this is mental, emotional, and physical inflexibility. People who are stuck in their ways, people who won't change their mindset, people who are physically quite tight and stiff in their body, people who have stiffness of joints, stiffness of movement. They're quite stubborn, they're reluctant, they're insular, leave me alone, don't come and change me, leave me to the way I am. They're quite often self-obsessed because it's all about them in a way. They focus on their disease, leave them be. And as we just said earlier, they often have slow digestion and slow transit. They'll go to the toilet maybe once every 2 or 3 days. You watch them walk, they probably move slow as well, slow and sluggish. This remedy is used quite often in hemorrhoids and gradually developing ailments. And many of you can already start thinking of the words we've just said of the remedies that come to mind, such as calc phos for our stubbornness, calc fluor for the inflexibility, costicum for ailments that gradually develop over time. They slowly lead to debilitation and slow us down. Natmure, again, grief related, don't want to move, I'm stuck, I can't get past the past, and sepia. Moving on, we have mutable. Now, the way I like to remember this, the clues in the name. Mutable means it mutates, it changes. So the bacteria itself, when cultured, changes. It has an ability within itself as an actual bacteria to change itself to its surroundings. So the keynotes of this are always changeable and anxiety. Things upset them, they change. They may change their mind, they may change their behaviors, and that leads us to think of remedies such as pulsatilla, which is known for change. These people can be indecisive, they do lack resolve, they're not sure, then they check themselves, they recheck themselves, and then they change their mind because they can't make a decision. Other things that come to mind remedy-wise were things like calc carb, which are people who can't make decisions as well. And they can't cope with stress. It's all too much for them. So to cope with the stress, what do? They become anxious, they become fastidious. They overplan and overprepare everything because that then can prevent failure. So they micromanage everything, and so the people around them, they can be quite annoying to live with because then they're projecting their own fears onto other people. At the same time, like pulsatilla, and as the bacteria says, mutable, they can change. They can change from being micromanaging to weepy, to insecure, and quite needy. That's a very interesting picture. Therefore, we can have these control-freak nux vomica lycopodium types and arsenicum types, and then they switch to a pulsatilla. And for those of us thinking, well, hang on a minute, which remedy or remedies am I giving? This is the time where we might consider mutable. Uses-wise, they're quite useful, well, actually very useful in antibiotic overuse, as indeed all of these are, because the antibiotics kill the gut flora. People who are bloated after eating, we think immediately of lycopodium, so we can see how the mental, emotions, and the physicals actually overlap with the remedy as well. Irritable bladder, now that's quite interesting. I saw a gentleman last week, 52 years old. Within the case of an hour, he must have gone to the toilet 7 times just to empty his bladder. And he only had a glass of water on the table with me. So it wasn't the volume, it was the nervousness, the changeable, the anxious, talking about his case. So when we see these behaviors, it makes us think of things like this quite easily. And oftentimes, if we've yet to analyze a case and the bowel nosode at the front of our mind, we can easily prescribe a bowel nosode while we analyze the case and prepare the rest of the prescription. Bacillus, number 7. There are 2 Bacillus strains. Number 7, the keynote, fatigue and weakness. I can talk about this, but the picture really does say it all. People are just shattered, mentally, emotionally, and physically just drained. Don't have anything in them. Even talking, even anything is an effort. Just leave me alone, let me be, I don't have anything left. Apathetic, can't be bothered, gloomy, don't want to know, run on flat batteries, that's it. So the cases, and this is brilliant in dealing with the very serious cases, when patients come to us and say, doctors have told us there's no cure for ME, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome. Just don't know why, but I don't have the energy like I used to have when I was younger. I'm worn out, I'm run down, I'm burnt out. I need 6 cups of coffee just to get me through the day. This is what makes us think of Bacillus. Also, Alzheimer's and senility. As we've just said, we may do another webinar at some point about the neurotransmitters and the important portals of bacteria and neurotransmitters. We said that if the gut flora is affected, it can affect our neurotransmitters being built, developed, and produced. So even if in age-old diseases the body doesn't naturally produce the transmitters, if we get the gut flora right, we can help to redress that balance. I won't go into that now because that's a whole different webinar, but a very interesting one as well. You should already start thinking of the remedies that come to mind. Costicum, Calicarb for weakness, aches and pains and joint pains. Caliphos for being mentally exhausted. Phosphoric acid for those that are just withdrawn, who used to be lively and they just don't have the energy anymore. Phosphoric acid as a remedy is quite useful because it's almost the anti-phosphorus. Phosphorus people are lively, sensitive, quite energetic. They like to be involved with people. But when they become the acidic version, they just can't give a damn. Leave me alone. I can't recognize myself anymore. So that's a nice way to understand the acidic versions of our remedies. Sulfuric acid is another very similar version of that from the sulfur remedy picture, as is picric acid. Bacillus number 10. This is quite a cool one. I actually love this one. Poisoning and trauma. Any type of poisoning. And without even reading any further, that has a chance to tell us we should immediately think of arsenicum, nux vomica, and poisons, Bacillus number 10. It affects the gut flora, totally eradicates all our good bacteria, and we're screwed, quite simply. But also the trauma is very important, the internal trauma. That can mean anything that happens inside the body, inflammations, operations, physical damage to the organs. And if you read further down there, even things like rape, even people who have anal rape and they've been traumatized and they don't know how to deal with that. Because with things like that, there isn't a specific rubric in many of the repertories. And sometimes people don't talk about this. But if they've been traumatized and they come to you in that picture, this is actually a very, very good nosode to use. I've used this quite a few times in the last few years with exceptional results. Even before I've started using things like Staphylococcus aureus. These people can be self-critical because they have this dislike of themselves. So in a way, they tend to towards a slightly syphilitic state. They're not too happy with themselves. That's quite interesting. They're obsessive, again, they're fastidious, and they're very sensitive to external impressions. You talk, you offend them, they get very easily, they withdraw back in. People who work in chemical environments, people who come to you working as gas station attendants, etc., anybody working in a lab, this is a very good remedy for them. Because even subconsciously, subliminally, they're ingesting and inhaling microparticles of toxins. So we'll come and they say, no, they're perfectly healthy, they eat well, they've got a good diet, they exercise, and yet something isn't quite right. Then we ask them, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a scientific researcher in a lab, and I deal with the benzocarbons, etc., and all these flammable liquids that they use. And you think, right, okay, bang, we know what we need to give. An interesting side note to this is they cannot digest eggs and fat. Now that's a really easy rubric in our repertories to find. I know the remedies come to mind, but very rarely will Bacillus be listed there. So that's quite a nice one to know alongside your other remedies for people who can't digest fats and eggs. And they're people whose gallbladder isn't working, while the liver isn't, which makes the bile, which is stored in the gallbladder. We have Gertner, or Gartner, however you wish to pronounce this, another very important remedy for malnutrition. We often think of malnutrition in children. So kids who are undernourished, low body weight, have a very rigid diet, only eats 2 or 3 types of foods, they come to mind. I had a patient last year, a 5-year-old girl, and all she wanted to eat was pasta. Her parents, for the life of her, couldn't get her to eat anything else. She was a little chubby girl, as you'd expect with someone who just eats pasta. So the immediate remedy picture, calc carb. We gave calc carb for 3-4 weeks. She considered other foods, went back to it. Then I thought, right, let's try Gartner. We tried Gartner, 1 dose once a week. When I saw her the following week, 4 weeks later, she tried Weetabix, she tried some salad. She went to school and didn't take a packed lunch with pasta and tried something in the canteen. Quite remarkable to see. So in younger children, the results are quite obvious and quite immediate and a great relief to the parents. This is also very, very useful for people with IBS, celiac, and Crohn's disease. because they are so sensitive. There are so many things they cannot eat. There are so many restrictions in their life. They just can't absorb anything. They get inflamed. They get sick. They have a reaction. This is brilliant for them. Also, people who are prone to allergies of all types, foodstuffs, dust particles. So this can be quite a tubercular remedy. And I think in the notes, Patterson will say it's a pre-tubercular remedy. We can worry about that, or we just say, look, this is how we can use this. People also fail to adjust and try new things. Now that's quite interesting because that links quite similarly to fecalist, which we just spoke to about a few moments ago. People are rigid in their thinking. Now I'm saying this now because later on people may ask, well, do you use one nosode on its own, or can you use a combination of nosodes? We're starting to see a picture where we can easily combine them and use them, pretty much the same way we would combine remedies. So when we see this picture with a few, there's no harm in combining them. Why? Because in the gut, in our body, they exist together with a predominance of one over the other. It's never just one bacteria in our gut. In fact, there are hundreds. Scientists are discovering new strains all the time. So that should lead us to think that this is why we need to combine our nosodes. Another great one for Gartner is short attention span. When I was a kid, we just called it hyperactive children. We didn't have words like ADT or anything, ADD. If people are hyper, they can't focus, they can't sit still, which is quite a tubercular indication anyway. You give them this, it will actually sort them out. It will settle them down. That's a nice word that I tend to use. When I deal with my parents, I say, this will settle your child down. Then I ask them, are they going to the poo? Yes, they go to the poo. Food just runs through them. Why? Because they can't digest it. So you can see the links, you can hear the language that the patients will talk to us about. So we think, right, that's how we can apply this. There's another one, as they all are, grateful for antibiotic overuse. I saw a girl 3 years ago. She was 3 years old. She must have had 6 courses of antibiotics in the course of probably 4 months. Then she had tonsillitis, then this. And her father was tubercular anyway. So I thought, hang on, we gave her tuberculinum, we gave her bacillinum. Nothing seemed to settle her down. We gave her calc carb, which is a great remedy to boost the immune system. But then I went back, I thought, well, what am I missing? Went back, looked up my notes, and thought, you know what? She's had so many antibiotics. Gartner did the tea. Why? Because it helped to restore and stimulate the repopulation of a gut flora. That's all she needed. And what did the gut do? We touched on it earlier. They boost our immune system. They make our antibodies, so our infections went down. Hence, the need for antibiotics was less and less. So that was restoring her to health with this simple nosode. They can be used quite often in catarrh, bronchitis, and all the tubercular ailments that we get. If you doubt them, try them, use them, you might be amazed. Use them in combination with tub. I often do. If I'm giving this with tub nowadays, now that I've learned from this young child from a few years ago, I will combine tuberculinum and Gartner and give it once a week, just as a simple split dose, either 200 on a Saturday, 200 seeds Saturday and Sunday, and just watch how they respond. And when they show the signs, we stop. It can be really quite simple. Now we have Morgengeithner. Now this is a different one. It's a very interesting remedy. The patients here, as it says there, I love me. It's about me, 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 and me. They're acidic, they're bitter. If it's not about them, they don't like it. They can be quite straight, quite blunt. Talk to you straight. You're thinking, wow, crikey, ask me how I'm doing. And even their behaviors will tell us. So this is what this bacteria, the pathology of this bacteria makes the person behave. They can be cruel and direct. And when we look at people who are cruel and direct, quite snappy, they tend to be quite acidic and bitter anyway. What we say, bulldog sucking a lemon or a sour face. That will tell us that this person needs this to chill them out. They can be quite irritable and angry. There's another nosode that is actually very irritable and angry remedy. We'll come to that in a moment. They're bossy, like lycopodium, and they can be quite jealous of other people's success. Not because of their success, because then the focus is not on them anymore. That's why. And look at the aggravation time, 4 to 8. It's a perfect complement to lycopodium. So when we have a bossy, jealous, control freak patients who get bloated after a meal, it's all about them, but then they want your sympathy and the remedy just isn't clearing up. We think of MG, Morgengeithner, and think, right, we know exactly what they need. So that helps. And again, it's brilliant for GERD or GERD, whatever have you, gastric esophageal reflux disease. Absolutely fantastic for that. So if you use it with your GERD remedies, it's a perfect complement. And indeed, most of the GI tract issues. It's also very good in impotence. That's linked directly with lycopodium. You can see that there. Have I used it? I used it in 2 patients last year to great effect. I gave them all the impotence remedies Agnus castus, sabal, even Tribulus terrestris as a herb, and it wasn't making much difference. We had them on lycopodium for a while because they're quite liverish and angry anyway. Morgan Geithner, alongside lycopodium, made the change. So these are the things that made me use bowel nosodes more and more in my practice over the last few years, as I learned to experiment myself and think, you know what, this makes sense. I need to give it to this patient because I'm not getting the result I want with my remedy. Not because the remedy don't work, because there's an obstacle to cure, or the picture is more complex than I can see. And I can only see what I observe or what the patient tells me. So this gives us that sixth sense into patients sometimes. Morgan Pure, absolutely fantastic remedy. Congestion in all its forms. I like the image there. Think of the motorway congested. Think of anything in our body that's congested, and that should lead us to think of Morgan Pure. For me, it's one of my #1 skin remedies for eczema, psoriasis, etc. We have many of our practitioners already at CPH using this. We had an excellent case from one of our practitioners over in Europe, Casper, who's used it to clear up a little child. He had the child on sulfur anyway, but when he used Morgan Pure, almost miraculously in the space of a few short weeks, that baby's skin cleared up. A perfect example of how Morgan Pure can enhance your treatments to your patients. Like I said, the congestion, it can even be brain fog. My mind's too clouded, I can't think straight. Not just the skin. So anytime they're congested or full or bloated or blocked. So now when we think about that, we think, gosh, we've got the pre-tubercular remedy there, and we've got this one, and can we combine them? And again, the answer is yes. These people are so blocked, they can't communicate their words and feelings. I can't think straight. I don't know what I'm trying to say, is how they'll talk to us. I will make a mental note. I'll take a breather here to stop. I think when I treat my patients, obviously we take our case, we analyze the case, we look at the indicated remedies. But in my head, I do this mental walkthrough and I think, what miasm is active? What nosode do I need? What sarcode may I need? What organs need supporting? Then I look at my remedies and say, what remedies do I need for this case anyway? And then alongside that, what I call additional support, what's the nutrition and supplementation, and is there any herbal program? That's what I call holistic homeopathy. So when we have a patient like this, we always go through that thing in my mind. Nosode, sarcode, miasm, remedy, nutrition, herbs, organ support. And if I do a mental check through, it may be that I only just need the remedy in a case and I'm absolutely fine. But it may be times where I think, okay, I've done everything else. The picture seems good. What else am I missing? And when I go through that, it points me to the right way, which is what the beauty of a follow-up is. Sometimes we have such a complex case that nothing is apparent at the first consultation. And we're chasing ourselves. What are we trying to clear up? But then we act on what we can see and on what our training tells us is underlying. When we use something else, it clears the picture. We can see better, delve deeper, and affect the cure more readily. So this one's absolutely fantastic. People are anxious about their health. Fear of crowds. Why? Because crowds are congested. So people get claustrophobic. They don't like being in lifts. Everything's congested. Fantastic in gout. Now this is brilliant because I've used colchicum a few times for gout. And I thought, well, why does colchicum not work so much? And then the person's congested and I ask them, how are they pooing? Oh, I eat 3-4 big hearty meals, but I only go to the toilet once a day. So I know their body's full of 3 big hearty meals and they're only opening their bowels once a day. No wonder even their little or their big toe is congested with gout, uric acid. So things like this can help clear up things like that if we have that thought process in our mind. Even with vertigo, head's congested. The beauty of this for me as well is the periodic headaches, as well as it being a great, great skin remedy. When we have periodicity, now I had a friend who had a migraine every 4 weeks and he'd be out of work for 3 days. And I tried for about 3 months to treat him and I thought, I'm not getting anywhere. Then I gave him this because what I forgot to ask him was, how often do you go to the toilet? And it doesn't mean it just opens your bowels. It tells me that he was congested on the inside. So sometimes it's like, well, what do I need to ask him again? Again, now if we look at the venous congestion, stroke, thrombosis, varicose veins, we can look at things like arnica and calc fluor as remedies for here. However, if they don't work or work as effectively as we know they should, we can actually add in Morgan Pure. Gallstones, fantastic case of gallstones. I treated my father's friend with this remedy. So it's useful for that. I gave him calc carb to help him with the gallstones. He was fat, fair, flabby. He shrunk one, but the others were taking a bit of time. And again, when it's your uncle, you don't tend to ask him how often he goes for a poo. But when you do tactfully find out, you think, right, I know what he needs. He's all backed up. Just like the traffic, people are all backed up. So great for piles, fibroids, polyps. Great, great remedy. Now this one, I love this one, Proteus. I just look at that picture of the Hulk and that's how I see someone. Are angry, angry people, easily snappy. People stand at the back of a queue and just snap. I saw it at the start of this COVID situation. I was getting my weekly food shop. A lady in front of me, she snapped at the lady next to her because she's pushed a trolley into her. And she was effing and blind into it, saying, do you not know the 2-meter rule? And I just thought, Proteus. So a great way we can remember it is it's Nux vomica on a bad day, it's Proteus on a good day. Brilliant, brilliant remedy for that. So people are always angry and the Nux vomica just doesn't make them feel better. This is a fantastic remedy to complement that prescription. The confrontational. These are the kind of people that have road rage. They might overcut you and they'll still turn around and hurl abuse at you. So you think, gosh, we know what they need. It affects the nervous system because that is what triggers the anger. And that's that gut reaction. People call it gut reaction. I don't know what happened. I just snapped. Well, isn't that telling us that the gut and the brain work together? That the neurotransmitters are linked to our gut flora, and bingo, boom, there we go. Great for spasmodic conditions. Epilepsy comes to mind. Convulsions, cramps, neuritis. All things that come all of a sudden. They get overwhelmed. Our epilepsy patients have an aura. Sometimes they feel it, sometimes they don't because it just came on too suddenly. And we look at the epilepsy remedies and think, well, what's missing? Then we look at Proteus and we ask them, how are you normally? Oh, absolutely calm. But I can flip on the on the end of a 2p piece. Then why is that? This might help. It helps settle them down. It stabilizes them. These are very good, important words. Now, this is also useful for people who are dependent on social drugs because they need that quick fix. I need to get high now. I don't need alcohol because that might take me 2 or 3 hours to get hammered. But if I take a bit of heroin or snort some cocaine, I've got an immediate high. So this is very useful to deal with people who are trying to come off things like that as well. And the sudden bursting headaches that we all hear from many of our patients. Great for that. Just sit down, boom, head starts throbbing, going to explode. Glonine comes to mind as a remedy. Proteus can complement it quite nicely. Now we see with the headaches, the previous remedy was about the periodicity of the headache. So we can see how these things are linked. Dysentery. Now this is an interesting one. I love this. Short name is Disco. And I love the picture, anticipatory anxiety. We already know things like arginate, gelsemium come to mind straight away. They're full of stress, they're anxious, but they're on edge. This is why I did these last 3 remedies together, Proteus, dysentery, and the next one, psychotico. These are all the anxious bowel nosodes. One is anxious, angry, all of a sudden snap, going to bite your head off, going to throw tantrums. This one is edgy, they're apprehensive, and they've got a fear. So you've got to walk around eggshells with them in case you trigger them off, but they're not going to snap their head off for them. Everything just gets too much. It's overwhelming for them. So there's a trait of calcarbon as well. Oh, it's too much for me. But it's also the what if, what if, what if. And you look at them and say, everything's actually okay. And they're the ones whose stomach churns with the nervousness. I don't know quite what's happening. This is also great in postnatal depression. A mother just had a baby, unknown charted territory. They don't know what to expect. They get quite nervous. The calcarb doesn't calm them down. The arginate doesn't calm them down. They've got to replenish their gut flora because they've just given birth. This helps to balance that out very, very well. Again, it works quite well with fibroids. So fibroids, again, used well with Geitner, Morgan Pure, beg your pardon, for congestion. Fibroids are congested matter. So it's a very, very good, useful remedy for that. When we ask people, how are you normally? Well, I worry a lot. I worry a lot. That causes stress to rise up, cortisol high, blocks the liver, the estrogen just doesn't get metabolized, leads to fibroids. That's that whole cascade on the endocrine system, which can be easily balanced out by dysentery. Now we've got another note here about enuresis with anxiety. Now enuresis, people need to go for a wee a lot. We've touched on this before. So even when we have children who wee a lot, when we have the elderly who wee a lot, because they're going to go on a car journey, and I'll just go for a wee because I know the journey's long. Then I'll stop at every service station to empty my bladder. This is a great remedy for them. Now the last one, psychotico, this is quite interesting. They're irritable and restless, but rather than being a little slightly on the angry side, they're quite nervous, they're shy, needy. They bite their nails. They're fearful. So, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. I wonder what if that happens. But not that they're snappy. They need a lot of reassurance, the TLC, the pulsatile types. And the interesting thing with this is everything is worse at night, so they're restless. Now, we can look at a rubric and say restless at night, and so many remedies come up. And this is what we mean about the bowel nosodes. They think, well, when there's a complex remedy picture, when there's too many remedies to choose from, when it's a remedy overlap between pulsatile and maybe rus tox or arsenicum, because the arsenicum are not timid people. So you think, well, which one do I use? Maybe we can think about psychotico to clear up that picture, and then the remedy later on will reveal itself which one is more needed than the other. Symptoms may change. That will indicate to a different remedy anyway. These people have a nervous bladder as well. Cystitis, now that's interesting. Balanitis, urethritis, inflammation of the genitourinary tract, an irritated GU tract. That's a very useful keynote for these here. So we can use things like cansaris, etc. But if they're always irritable, always nervous, a little bit shy, part of my language, things just tend to piss them off, but they keep it inside, psychotico is a great remedy for that. That, in essence, is my walk through the nosodes, keeping them simple. I'll leave this up for a little while as a quick little table. I'm sure you'll have your own, and I'm sure you'll have many, many remedies that you can think of that complement these nosodes quite well. Thank you for listening. Any questions?
Thanks, Som. Can you hear me?
Yes, Tanya, thank you.
Okay, cool. For those of you that have questions, please pop them in the chat box. I don't seem to have any questions come up yet. Maybe some people are typing. We've got a few people typing, so we might just wait a few minutes while we wait for anybody who's got any questions for Som to answer. So maybe in the meantime, you could talk about CPH and the courses that we have on at the moment and how these bowel nosodes fit into the course.
Okay.
And what course the bigger, because as people have asked for longer versions of these courses, but there's a reason why we are only doing these short bursts. And I think I think you're best suited to explain why we only do them in short bursts.
Thank you, Tanya. Very good point, actually. Well, first of all, for the people that do view and listen in, thank you very much for this. These aren't tasters, these aren't teasers. As we said today, it's a practical guide, a very hands-on guide, and hopefully you've got useful notes here that you can use in your practice or start to understand the nosodes and not fear them. This is not a full course in itself. It's a 30-minute walkthrough, but it's very practical. Obviously, all colleges will teach their own. We have a very practical way. It's in our name. We say, how can you have all this knowledge, apply this knowledge in the way you're going to for your cases? So we teach this in depth, at length, but we apply it on a case-by-case basis. So we can read the theory of nosodes. That's great. But until I can have a patient picture and a person in front of me with a personality and a symptom picture, I cannot really apply it. And webinars are not the forum for them unless we do a particular case and do a case analysis, which we may do in the future. If you think that's useful, please send us feedback in the comments and we will make that available on various types of cases. So this touches on it, but at least it adds value so people listening can go away thinking I have a better view or a slightly better understanding, or it stimulates me to read a little bit more about it. But when you do the course itself, you come out the other end fully qualified. Yes, we have two types of courses. One for people who know nothing and want to be a professional homeopath. We bring you from knowing nothing to be an expert in the body, holistically. And as I touched on my first slide, we cover 7 or 8, 9 elements of health, not just homeopathy, but we offer that as part of our homeopathy course, which makes our course very unique amongst the world, in the world. We have a separate course for people who are already healthcare practitioners or professionals, either doctors, nurses, pharmacists, or complementary medical practitioners or Reiki masters, kinesiologists, etc. And that's the postgraduate course. That's quite intense. It's over a shorter duration because there's a lot of anatomy and physiology that you know. So that brings you to the same level, albeit in a shorter process, because we build upon the knowledge you're already using in your existing professions. While we're still waiting for the question, Tanya, I don't know if you have any. I can just talk about potencies and dosing if you wish.
We've got quite a few questions.
Oh wow.
Okay, so how long do you prescribe?
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Well, you can prescribe depending on the case. Now, the longest I've had a bowel nosode go for is 6 months, to be fair. And one of the reasons for that is the gut flora repopulates itself every 3 days. So I love that question because we'll attack it in 2 ways. One is, how often should you give the remedies? So no more frequently than every 3 days for me. Other people may give something, every day. However, the gut flora will change the behavior and clear the picture. If it doesn't, we have to ask ourselves, what else are we missing in the case? It's not that the remedy fails. Remedies don't fail. We fail in not knowing the picture completely. So how long would I give it for? We stimulate the vital force. There's the principles of homeopathy. Wait for the response and leave it be. If not, we may need to stimulate further or deeper. But every time we follow it up, we shouldn't just put them on a prescription without reviewing on a weekly or monthly basis, because we expect the patient to change. The bowel nosodes are remedies. Please treat them as such. Just like the miasmatic remedies, they're remedies first. They just happen to be derived from bacteria in the gut and the poo. So really, my closing note to this webinar should be, it's not about the bacteria, it's about the symptom picture in the patient. So as your symptom picture in your patient changes, please review the needs of the remedy or remedies. Hope that answers that question.
Cool. Can you treat with the nosode? That's a question.
Brilliant question. Yes, you can. Have I done it myself? Yes, I did it 3 times in the last 5 months myself. And one was a skin case, one was an acne case, actually. Treated that. And again, like I said, the patient a couple of weeks ago, the 52-year-old man who went to the toilet 7 times in an hour, didn't need anything other than the nosode. So can you do it? Yes. Should you do it? Your choice. What we're saying is remove the fear, give it a go, and you'll be surprised how powerful all the remedies are, not just the nosodes, but just treat them like a remedy.
Are all these nosodes in the polybowel nosodes?
Not all of them. You have 10 or 11 nosodes. There's another nosode I haven't included here, which was just Morgan itself, because Morgan had 2 strains, Morgan Pure and Morgan Gaitner. So yes, they are, and you can use them that way if you wish. You can combine them yourself if you wish, or you can combine the 2 or 3 that have the similar symptom picture. The question I would ask back to you is, are they available? Yes, they are. But when you prescribe them that way, ask yourself, what am I trying to achieve? If you're trying to cover all your bases and you just want to tick your box, by all means use them. If you want to challenge yourself and say, well, actually, no, I want to get to know these remedies better, I want to know the specific keynotes of each of them, then you might want to combine 2 or 3 yourself. So there's no right or wrong. The choice is in your hands as a practitioner. Thank you.
What potencies do you usually give?
Fantastic. I love that. Because if we read the text, they'll tell you things. And the texts were written, as we said, 40, 50, 60 years ago by people who were quite fearful. Oh my gosh, you can't give it more than once and you have to give a low dose. The potencies I use most often are 200C, 10M, and 50M. And I tend to have my own little protocol in my head, regardless of the patient, that I tend to give them on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday. And if I'm giving them as an adjunct to an additional remedy, such as a miasmatic remedy, I touched on that earlier when I was giving tuberculinum as well, I tend to give them 200C Saturday, Sunday, done. If I know something has been a more serious condition, someone's got thrombosis or had varicose veins for 20 years, I might give them 10M on a Saturday once a week and continue that for a month. And then when I review them again, I ask them how their mood is, how their bowels are, if they're going more regularly. I don't expect the varicose veins to change in a month, but I expect their internal behavior and the way they are and their personality to change, which is why we focused on the personalities with the remedies today. They are so, so key, because when our gut is rebalanced, our behavior changes. When our behavior changes, our symptom picture changes. When the symptom picture changes, the right remedy will come up, or the remedy we've given will be no longer necessary. So it's always to say, be vigilant, be observant, and that will, your patients will guide you to what they need. Hopefully that will answer that question.
Do we continuously boost our immune system? When I suggested this lockdown would mean our immunity will drop, and when we then start mixing with people again, will we get ill? The response was, we build our immunity when we're young.
Yes. Okay. I'll try and excuse us for not interpreting your question properly, so the error might be ours, but we will try and answer that question to the viewer. Our immunity is our immunity. We're always building it up. So this is why children get sick more often, because they're building their immune system. And touch wood, adults shouldn't get ill that often. We should still get ill every time we interact with a different pathogen, or a virus, or a bacteria, or a fungus. So that's fine. Lockdown doesn't affect our immunity, but our stress during lockdown does. As we just said, one of the obstacles to cure is our environment. And if we're in a stressful environment, we are changing our gut flora, which will affect our immunity, because our bacteria are not producing our immunoglobulins, etc. However, we did a webinar. In fact, I think I did the webinar 18th of March, our very first COVID webinar, where we focused quite extensively on boosting our immune system, using things like vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin A, absolutely essential. Echinacea, herbs, ginger, garlic, lemon, all these things can boost the immune system anyway. So I know everyone's going back to school in the UK. The world's trying to go back to normal. We're a little bit anxious. Now, if we're anxious over that, we've just touched on a few remedies here. And if we look on this table here, we've got anticipatory anxiety. We've got dysentery co. Now, straight away, you think, right, I might well give myself some disco to get over my anxiety, even if I don't need a remedy. That will balance me. It will calm my levels down and allow my gut flora to flourish and rebalance that symbiosis, that homeostasis in my gut. So, but if we're overly paranoid, that tells us that we might need a remedy anyway about anxiety. Arginate, arsenicum come to mind. We can help ourselves this way, but we can also help ourselves with nutrition, which is the foundation of all health anyway. So lockdown does not affect our immune system. It's how we behave during lockdown that does. I hope that's answered that clearly. My apologies if we haven't interpreted your question correctly.
How often do you rely on your intuition?
Oh, I love it. Well, intuition is what they call a gut instinct. So how apt with a conversation about bowel nosodes. Intuition is built with experience. So first you learn, then you do, then you repeatedly do, then you just know. A bit like how we learn to drive a car, or how people nowadays, kids nowadays, text without even looking at the keyboard, how martial artists practice their moves and their punches and the defenses without even seeing, because they just know. The neural pathways are built in. And neural pathways require neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are made by our gut bacteria. So do I rely on my gut? Yes. Why? Because the number of cases I do keeps reminding me and either reinforcing or telling me, saying, well, actually, you're off the point. Help me refocus where I need to be. So use the gut to guide you, by all means. You got to feel it. Thank you.
Do you recommend a good textbook?
Ooh.
Somebody said something about Anthony.
Yes, okay. Do I recommend a good book list? Yes, we have many on our book list for our students, but it'll be remiss of me just to say that here, quite tongue-in-cheek. But yes, Anthony Bickley has a great one. I think it's called A Guide to the Bowel Nosodes or something like this. He's got explanations of the remedies in there. He's also got a materia medica in there. So people who like to take the materia medica approach, the head, the mental, emotional, physical, stomach, skin, etc., you can delve into there. Because now with the last 40, 50 years, more and more people are experiencing the bowel nosodes. These books are quite abundant, but you can't really go wrong with Bickley. You'll find it very useful and actually quite a simple read. So thank you for that.
Okay, I think that's about it, actually.
Brilliant.
Nobody else seems to be asking any questions, so that's all good. So, yep. Thanks, Som.
No, thank you, Tanya. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. Please, I hope this just unlocks your own desire to say, let's explore the nosodes more. They're just remedies. If you see the symptom picture, go over these slides again, take the notes, see that person sat in front of you and use them. And then strengthen the homeopathic community by your own feedback, by telling your colleagues, your colleges, etc. And indeed tell us. So thank you very much.
Just to say that we'll be doing more webinars, and we have been doing quite a few lately. So if you are interested in any more webinars, just go to our website, the CPH, and register on the homepage. You'll see there's a webinar registration spot there. And if you've got any questions for Som that haven't been answered or you didn't want to ask in public forum here, just email Som at som, S-O-M, at thecph.co.uk, and I'm sure, Som, you will be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, I will. And just to give people a quick heads up on what they can expect in the next few weeks, we will be doing, starting now, a 3 or 4 part series on vitamins and minerals. So if you're interested in that, please register your interest with us. Stay tuned. There's a lot to go out there, and we will break them up into bite-sized, easily digestible chunks, shall we say. And hopefully we will have your company as we undergo them as well. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.